Hello. Hopefully I should be live. Who knows? Very rarely me. Trust me. It's very rarely me that knows whether I'm live or not. Yay! According to that over there it is. So I've started a few minutes early. I doubt anyone will be around for about 5 minutes, but that's fine. In fact, I'll go remind everyone on Facebook that I'm live. I would if it was easy for me. Yeah, one of you nice people in the comments, can you go and remind people that I'm live? Hey, Bronwyn! Yay! You're regularly the first person here. That's a good thing. See who turns up next. Make sure that you can hear me or everything. Yeah. If you ever get the feeling you spend a lot of time on these streams saying, no, you can't hear me and things like that, that's because, you know, I'm a twit. So, yes, we will start tonight. We'll give everyone a chance to get over from Facebook, etc. Yeah, we only have you on right now. Tonight's talk is about feeding fish. I will be putting out quite a serious book on this one. There's going to be many thousand words for people. Hey, we've got someone else. Woo! We have people arriving. I did start a little bit early, guys. Normally because I managed to make a mess of something and I'm then late. So I thought I'd start a bit early. And I can chat rubbish until past when everyone turns up. But nope, you guys are turning up already. I was just saying that, so I am right now in the process of getting together the research on quite a chunky book on, it's going to be something like The Ultimate Guide to Feeding Your Fish or something in that sort of region. Thank you for posting on the Facebook page, Bronwyn. I just can't, for some stupid reason, it gives me all the and there must be a button I can press, but it's me. And I'd rather not press anything because, you know, it's me. People say, yeah, being at work and day and all that stuff. So I've been doing the research into that sort of thing, and it's interesting, to be honest. And I'm a bit geeky. We all know I'm a bit geeky. We have to accept that. But it's really interesting, some of the stuff I'm finding out about what our fish eat and what they don't eat, and some of the things that I thought I knew, that I was quite confident I knew, turns out I didn't really. Or I was halfway there, I knew half the story, and the rest of it was getting a bit lost in translation. So I thought I would share it with you guys and let you know. I'll probably end up doing a mini-series of videos on this, because I keep finding things and go, ooh, everyone would like to know this, and I can't do a live every time I find something new. Although this is me. But you guys would get pretty bored with me bobbing online every 20 seconds going, did you know? Did you know so-and-so says? Yeah, Facebook playing up. I don't know what to say about Facebook anymore. People say, am I abandoning Facebook? I feel like Facebook's abandoning me. They told us a while ago, they started giving us warnings that they thought the group was too big to sustain meaningful conversation. I don't know. They may be right, they may be wrong on that one. But lately there's been so many faults that we just can't do anything about. So I've got at least 2 of my team out of action because they get notifications that things have been said. And they can't find the post. It just takes them to the group. You know, someone in the 1,500 comments that have been done today said something that you need to deal with. So, yeah, that's the thing. So yes, if you're interested in wanting the courses, which I am starting filming again, I think tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. It is. It's Saturday today. I'm starting to film all that again tomorrow. You've got 2 options with the courses. You've got 3 options, sorry. You can just wait till I get them out as standalone individual courses, and that will be coming up. You can subscribe to our Patreon. I've put the link in the description. For one of the tiers you get a course a month, and then every second month you get one of our smaller books. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I hate to say the smaller books. They're still decent sized books, but they're not like this fish keeping one, which is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Every second month you get one of them. And so yes. Yeah, Don's on there. He's saying he's one of the people who can't get the things. So it's one of those things. We're trying our best, and we're getting let down. I do think it's because they're not liking animal groups, and we fall squarely in that animal groups. For those of you who don't know, there was a meeting, or there's either just been a meeting or it's just been called something like that. Basically, some of the big animal rights groups want to crack down on the illegal trade online of animals. The issue is there's not as much illegal. Sorry, they want to crack down on the illegal trade. Yeah, I've had one of those days. They want to crack down on the illegal trade. However, they're managing to conflate the legal trade with the illegal trade. If you go online and you look for videos about ham reptile show, you'll find a lot of things that say it's completely illegal, ham's completely illegal, all these illegal reptiles. In one of the videos, the guy goes around, he goes to a stall of reps that have all got different colour morphs, and that's sort of like saying like a parrot's a wild caught fish. We as fish keepers can look at that and go, that thing's never been in the wild in its life. Electric blue rams, they don't show up in the wild. Even albino species are very, very rarely found in the wild because they're just handy to be eaten. You know, they show up nicely. So what that then means is they are now calling for all trade in animals online to be stopped because of some small amount of illegal species. Now, I don't think that's going to affect the big websites, but I do think it's part of what's impacting on us. It's a lot easier for the bigger companies to say, well, we don't want our shareholders to think we're allowing cute little fluffy animals to be sold online. We'll crack down above the board. But yeah, a few more went today, including some that had only recently been started to replace other ones that had been shut down, so it's still ongoing. So yes, so tonight's vague topic is quite a big one, but basically I wanted to look at feeding. Let me make a note. I just thought something. I knew there was something else I needed to write down. I have notes, people. Otherwise I just ramble and rant. And you know what I'm like if I start ranting. Might be one or two in there. So yes, feeding your fish. We get a lot of this. We get a lot on the group. And it comes in for a couple of areas that we see, and we see problems, and then we see big areas where people come up and they go, what can I do about such and such? And I'm sort of like thinking, well, I don't really want to write War and Peace about that, but I'm going to need to write War and Peace. And I'm sorry, a comment isn't really the place for me to write 18 paragraphs of info about what you should be feeding your fish. So like I say, I'm going to, the book's coming out as soon as I can get the damn thing written. It's a good start for bringing one out. I will be looking for some people to proofread it, because it's me. If you think I'm bad at electrocuting yourself, you should have checked my spelling. I mean, poor Don's wandering around on there. He's in the admin group where I don't check my spelling. You should see some of the stuff I say in there. Makes no sense. Luckily, most people have got used to now translating my spelling mistakes. Anyway, so feeding your fish. There's a few things with feeding. And the first one is, if you feed them the wrong stuff, you can lead to a lot of diseases. You can mess up your water quality royally. And you can... 2 seconds. Spell check is not my friend. Spell check changes my words to things I didn't mean. Yeah. I've got Grammarly, which is quite good. It doesn't change it. It just asks me, do I want to change it? And yeah, it also has a bit of a freak out when I use Latin terms. I do use them occasionally. I just can't spell them. So anyway, so the thing with feeding, the things you need to be careful of is you don't want to be encouraging diseases, which is one of your main issues. If you feed the wrong foods to a huge number of fish, they'll get ill. You want to be feeding them enough good quality nutrition that they'll grow and that they've got enough energy. You want to be changing the feeding for certain things, so you want to be feeding fry different to adult fish. You want to also be feeding fish you're trying to condition, maybe for breeding, different from other fish. If your fish are wild caught, you want to be conditioning them, or sometimes they may not even recognize flake. So you've got different things you should be feeding at different times. Bad quality food equals a loss of waste in your tank. And that's the reality. Fish food goes off. Don't forget that. And yeah. Fish food goes off, so don't just think. So one of my big things, mini rant, sorry, I warned you guys that there might be 1 or 2 rants. So buying bulk fish food. Sorry, one of the dogs is scratching at the back of my chair here. Buying bulk fish food off eBay. I'm not going to name any brands. If you are getting fish food in plain bags and you are buying it by weight, not by container. So I'm not talking about someone who's coming along and is selling, say, Tetra Foods in the recognized sizes. But someone who's saying, buy it in the kilo. Loose flake in the kilo. Tell us what weight you want and we'll send it. And the picture is normally of loose flake or pellets or something like this. Okay, point one. You don't know what's in there. I know some people who do it, and what they do is they buy the big tubs and then they break it down. So you don't know whether they're definitely selling you what they're claiming to. But let's assume they're vaguely honest and they are selling what they're claiming. You don't know how old it is. And that's a crucial one. So Fish Science is a good example. Fish Science do a big 1 kilo bag. They don't sell it that often. It's not like something you see in every shop. Don't even know if Dave still sells them. On occasion, when you go to auctions and fish shows, he will have stuff that is close to date on sale. And he'll be like, I don't want it, if you're going to use it, I'll sell it to you cheap. So people like me, I've got a big fish room, I can go through a kilo bag of food before it goes out of date. However, if you're buying that on eBay, there is a very good chance they bought a load and they're breaking it down into smaller amounts. They're probably doing it in their shed or in their kitchen, and you don't know what else is going in. But crucially, that food was opened when they opened it, not when you opened it. So it's now starting to go stale. It's now starting to get bacteria in it. It's now starting to lose the goodness, which is what you're trying to feed your fish. Would you take... So, pick something you like. Biscuits. Okay, in this household, my dad eats loads of custard creams. I would not go and buy 6 months worth of custard creams, open the packet and leave them there. Which is what you're doing if you buy bulk fish food. Buy what you need for a short amount of time. I'd say flakes, I don't really want that pack. It's a bit different for me because I've got the big amounts. I can go through a tub reasonably quickly. But if you're talking about being open longer than 3 months, absolutely pushing it. I'd rather see it used within a month. But if you've got tubs that have been there 3, 6, 12 months, get rid of them. You should be feeding a variety. But you should be making sure that stuff that comes in sealed containers gets used in a reasonable amount of time. Think about it. You're keeping that under your fish tank. It's dark, it's damp. It's the ideal breeding ground for all sorts of molds and all this sort of thing. And then you go and feed that to your fish. You may not be able to see it because it's slow growing, but it's still not great. And you think about it. Flake is dry. As soon as it gets mushy. I'll tell you one thing that happened to me. I buy the big Vitalis tubs for feeding in the fish house, so I'll sometimes buy those big bulk ones. Great value. So I had a stack of metal containers that I keep them in so that no creepies or anything get in. So, no problems. Using them all up. For some stupid reason, I put one behind the other and just forgot it was there. About 6 weeks later, I realised it was there, opened it. The smell. It had gone mouldy and horrible. And that wasn't their fault. I just had the food open too long. There is a reason it's in a nice sealed container when it comes down. So yes, if you're going to buy your fish food, buy quality. And crucially, you're probably going to save money. Because that low quality stuff that's sold by the kilo on eBay is such poor quality that your fish aren't getting the nutrition out of it. So, what do your fish actually need as nutrition? They don't need kilo bulk flake food off eBay. That to one side, anyway. Yeah, by the way, I'm hoping, guys, I'm loud enough. No one said I'm super quiet anyway. So, what do your fish need? We tend to roughly break the fish down into carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. So, fish that just eat meat, fish that just eat vegetables or algae or something like that. I'm going to break that down further, don't worry. And fish that pretty much eat anything. Let's look at carnivores for a start. Discus, we used to basically just feed discus beef heart, and some keepers still do. I've got a problem with that, and I do think that's where a lot of deficiencies come in, and I do think that's where hole in the head in discus can be traced back to a certain extent. Nothing wrong with beef heart, but you are only feeding beef heart. look at our diets. Look carefully at our diets as humans and start to think of the things we are told we need to stay healthy. And then listen to what we feed our fish, and you'll start to see there's some huge gaps. Yeah, as Don's just said, discus, well-known predators of cows. It doesn't work. So, what are the things that we hear day to day? We hear about free radicals. We hear about antioxidants. We hear about good gut bacteria. We hear about variety. What's the thing? If you're feeding your kids chips and turkey Twizzlers all the time, they're going to get sick. That's not that there's anything wrong with turkey and chips. It's that you're feeding just that all the time. We don't want to be feeding ourselves too much salt, too much sugar, all these things. And when you consider we are probably the species most adapted to be able to eat anything, then if it's good for us, it's nearly 1,000 times more important for our fish. So, what should we be doing? First of all, do your research. Do your research and find out what they'd eat in the wild. So what would discus be eating in the wild? Even without picking up a textbook, you can start to look at your fish and figure a few things out. Are their mouths really, really tiny? Okay, if their mouths are really, really tiny, they are probably not chasing down big fish and eating them. If their mouths are upturned, then they're not grazing on the bottom. If their mouths are downturned, then they are grazing on the bottom. If they've got barbels, again, it's a catfish thing. Think about catfish barbels. What are they used for? They're used for rooting around in the sediment and finding food. So all of a sudden you're starting to say, well, hold on, then they're probably eating things off the bottom. For the bigger catfish, actually they're probably eating fish that are laying on the bottom or close to the bottom. And a lot of them will use their barbels just to find their way around. But look at a cory. A cory tells you what it eats just by looking at it. Downturned, quite a small mouth. Its behaviour is it runs through the sand and it pulls out insects and sort of larvae and anything small, little micro stuff out of the sand. Look at a hill stream loach. Big, flat, tiny mouth on the bottom, designed for rasping. So we tend to say they're algae eaters. They eat the stuff that lives on algae. It's got two names. The technical name is periphyton. There's other names for it. Auswash, I think. I can never pronounce that one. I'm awful at pronouncing things that I have to see written all the time. But anyway, periphyton is the technical term for it. It's all the detritus and the bacteria and the very, very small creatures that live in algae. They just hoover that all up. So you're already starting to say, right, I'm going to look at my fish and I'm going to say, so angelfish, they're well-known predators of things like neon tetras. Their mouths don't turn up, their mouths don't turn down, and they do open quite large. Then you can start to look at the families. Well, South American cichlids. A huge number of South American cichlids predate on other fish. I can't really think of many South American cichlids that are big vegetarian eaters, big anything other than predators and micro-predators. You've got also included in that pike cichlids, which will kill anything that they can reach and then eat it. Oscars, Central American cichlids, again, they're big bruisers of cichlids and they tend to be eating other fish. But here's a crucial one. Let's say you've got a species that in the wild eats 100% other fish. That's all it does. It just cruises around all day eating other fish. Don't forget that in that other fish's guts is a full meal. That other fish ate something and is digesting it. So you might sit there and go, my fish is, I don't know, John's going to have something there that just eats in the wild other fish. In its gut, that other fish will have had quite a bit of vegetation. So you need to replicate that. It will have had a liver that's often taken out in the stuff that we feed with all those oils. You need to be replicating that. It will have a brain. It will have bones. All this sort of thing. So you might say, well, snakeheads, rainbow snakeheads, there you go, I'm looking at getting them, so I'm looking at their diet. And a lot of people just feed them purely on prawns. Okay? Well, let's roll back a second. Actually, prawns, of course, out the sea. So they've got a different oil chemistry makeup. You're not going to get things like snakeheads living solely on cherry shrimp and things like that. Little tiny ones. They're actually going to be eating reasonable chunks of other fish and that sort of food stuff. And again, we've got that gut, but we've got all the extras. If any of you are into raw feeding on dogs, one thing that's often pushed is fur, feather, bone, and fur. So you've got to include those things into your diet. Yeah, rainbow snakeheads eat bugs. Bugs are always filled with vegetation, etc. And this is the sort of thing you've got to mimic. So let's have a look at well-known ones. Betta, beta, beta, however you want to pronounce it. There was a debate on the group. Fighting fish. Let's go with fighting fish for this talk, shall we? Little upturned mouths, quite well known as being micropredators. I also keep a couple of species of gourami. Again, same sort of diet, micropredators. So they go around and they eat all the small animals that they can get their mouths around. And we are talking about Diphinia, bloodworm. We're talking about insects that might land on the surface. They'll probably snack on a bit of vegetation, but it's not the bulk of their diet. But they are getting some in the guts of the bugs. So what should you be feeding them? Okay, I quite like fish science food because it's based on insect meal. There's also fluval bug bites. But how about feeding them actual bugs, actual things that they'd eat? And for something like that, it's incredibly easy to part replicate their diet. So what do? I have microworms, I have white worms, I have Diphinia. And I culture those three. And then I can just feed them. Why do I culture them? I do go and buy them from the shop if I'm low. Why do I culture them? Because then I know what's being fed to them. So my Diphinia are kept in green water. I add yeast and things like that. So my Diphinia are nice and healthy and are taking all the nutrients through with them. I catch mosquito larvae in the summer. There's always buckets out around. And then I just catch all the mosquito larvae out of there. That's come straight out the wild. There is a small risk of things being transmitted up the food chain. But I think that risk is dealt with by the fact that you are feeding them a whole meal that reduces the risk of deficiencies. And that is one thing I do believe in. If you're a bit worried about that, and we could all name a couple of people that really, really are, feed frozen. You can get frozen foods like this that replicate their diet nice and well. But don't just get one. If you've got one fighting fish, don't get one pack of bloodworm. Get a mixed pack so that you're feeding, and get like it's a tropical quartet you can buy of frozen foods. That's a good staple. Add in some live if you can get hold of it and you're happy to. And then maybe look at something like Repashy if you can get them on it. If they're happy on it, then Repashy is a good one. But pick one that's quite high in protein. And that should help contribute towards a longer life. The risk that you come with is most of us have got community tanks. Now I'm going to say one important thing. If you have incredibly specialised fish that have an incredibly specialised diet, don't keep them in a community tank. And everyone who knows me knows I'll bang on about this. We keep fish for our pleasure. The fish didn't suddenly walk in and go, oh, actually, yeah, I'd really like to live with them. We choose which fish we keep. So on top of me saying keep fish based on your water, keep fish based on their tank mates, I'm now also going to add keep fish based on their diet. Luckily, most fish are more, you've got to include something, not exclude something. But things like Malawi cichlids, specifically Mbuna, you've got to be very, very careful with their diet. Discus, they quite like quite a high protein diet, which then can cause fouling of the water, which is why most discus keepers do big water changes. Hill streams can get quite easily. Hill streams, ottos, things like this, you've got to have the algae sources for them. You can increase their diet, but what you've got to make sure is they have those things available. So ottos, yes, you can keep in a tank as long as you're willing to do a little bit extra. Hill streams have got so many other problems and specialists set up for them. Plex are where we see the big issues, where people put a plec in and go, oh, it's an algae eater, it'll be fine. Actually, plenty of plecs are carnivorous. They'd actually feast on other animals. They'd eat possibly dead. I doubt they'd be able to catch it, but there's probably enough waste there that they can be the scavengers, the sort of vultures of their stretch of river. And yeah, so Don's just saying there, where's the thing about oddballs? They're normally pretty specialised, so you can't keep much with them. And often that can be their diet. And one crucial thing with a lot of the fish that I know people like Don keep is not that they've got a specialist diet that you can't supply with any other fish round, any other fish round are their diet. That can be one big problem. Don't forget that. We see that like people keep neons with angels. That's brilliant for the angels. Not so good for the neons. That they are an angelfish's natural diet. So you can, to a certain extent, compromise, but only as long as you're going to keep those fish healthy. There is so much choice of fish that with a bit of research, you can keep a tank full of omnivores. You can keep a tank with omnivores that maybe need a bit extra adding. So we're talking about these more unusual plex that are difficult to feed. Then just make sure you're adding these things in. Even your bog standard bristlenose needs wood to rasp on to a certain extent. They don't need huge amounts, but they need that bit of extra fibre in their diet. What do bristlenose plex normally eat? Yeah, algae wafer, make sure they get... So, yeah, good timing, because you're a little bit behind me on this one. So, bristlenoses. In the wild, they would eat a lot of algae. They would feast on any vegetation they could get their mouths around. But generally, I'd be feeding them a vegetarian diet with a little bit of access to other flakes. They do need bogwood in there for them to rasp on. And most of the time, I'd say drop in a chunk of something meaty every so often. So every couple of weeks, you'll often find they'll dive onto a prawn or something like that. There's no harm in that. It's not going to totally kill them. But I wouldn't say more than every couple of weeks, every month, let them have access to that. They're one that if they get too much protein in their diet, it can start to cause problems. And we're coming on to one of those reasons more towards the end. So yeah, avoid your specialist feeders, do your research. And one thing that's winding me up something chronic lately is community fish. Does it wind anybody else up? You walk into a shop and they've got loads of signs that say community fish. What community? Okay, Malawi are a community of Malawis. South American community, that can be anything. I mean, pike cichlids would love it in a community. They'd see them all as a light snack. But yeah, community fish. Angels are community fish. No, they're not. Angels need a specialist setup built around angels. I love angels. I've kept them plenty of times. If you're going to keep them, make sure you keep them with fish that are way too big for them to ever think about eating. Make sure your tank's super tall. And make sure they're getting a reasonably high protein diet because they mostly feed on insects and small fish. So this is the sort of thing you need. Yeah, anything with high protein diet makes a lot more waste, and I'm just about to move on to something about that. So, next question everybody throws at me. How much? How much food should you feed your fish? And that is a really tough question. And I know it sounds like that's a cop-out. It's too difficult. No, it's not. But it is something to start thinking about. So, it is very difficult to underfeed your fish. You can do it. You can stop feeding them for 3 months. That'll underfeed them. But it is very difficult to underfeed your fish. So never worry about underfeeding. Always worry about overfeeding before you do that. If your fish are losing weight and are starting to look a bit skinny, then you're underfeeding. Don't let it get to the point they're skeletal before you increase the feed. One problem with fish, so just as a slight aside, if you ever do get in a scenario where you rescue fish, like someone dumps them on you or you find them and they're absolutely skeletal, you're going to struggle to get them round because fish like us have certain hormones that will keep sugar in the blood to keep them active. So, when they're stressed by bad water, lack of food, predators in the tank, whatever it is, the hormones will actually help them stay alive. You then put them in decent water, start feeding them, and take away the predators. They relax. Those hormones go away, and in about 2 to 3 days later, you get dead fish. I've done it more times than I'd like to own up to. I've taken fish on. Someone's contacted me and said it was a tank being abandoned for the last 4 months. Water's stinking to high heaven. I get there, the fish look skinny, but okay. Bring them, put them in their own tank in the fish house, look at them. 2 days later, they're all dead. It's just heartbreak for me. What have we got comments here? Yeah, you'll sometimes get, right, sorry, there was a question about Plex. Don't ask me about 2ID Plex, they're all Plex to me. Sorry. I can just about tell some from the others. Post it up again in there, or try on the forum. If you try on the forum, then I'll tag people who will know better than me in there. Yes, Ruthven 2. Ruthven 3 even. So, where was I on that one? So how much to feed? Actually, the main problem with feeding is your ammonia that drives your cycle comes almost exclusively from what you put in your tank. So it's not a question of how much can my fish take, it's a question of how much can my filters cope with. Whatever you do, never increase your feeding drastically. So if you increase the number of fish, don't increase the amount of food you do. In fact, drop your food for the first day. Second day, go back to your normal feeding levels. Don't put any extra in. They're not going to starve. Probably actually the new fish aren't even feeding yet. Third day, increase by a tiny bit. Fourth day, increase by a tiny bit until you're back to what you think they should all be fed on. The rule of thumb it always says on the side of packets is feed as much as they will eat in 3 minutes. That is really helpful for fish that won't come out until you've gone. That's really helpful for things like courgettes and cucumber that you're weighing down. Oh, and by the way, cucumber's got plenty of nutrients in it. It's only got slightly more water than courgette. I love that one when you read it online. Everyone goes, oh, cucumber's mostly water. So is what the fish are swimming in. And by the way, guys, you're not trying to fatten your fish up. It's not like they're starving. We are not talking about special fish that need to be fed up because they're dying. In fact, most of your fish are going to be overweight. So what? You're giving them something that's low in nutrients. They're eating it, aren't they? Anyway, slight rant over, but there's nothing wrong with cucumber, except sometimes it's caused, I've seen some cucumbers cause bacterial blooms. More often than I'd like, and that's probably the reason I steer away from shop-bought cucumbers. I'm saying that very particularly. I am lucky I've got parents with an allotment, and we get lots of cucumbers about this time of year. They've just stopped handing them over. But check the nutrients of a cucumber versus a courgette. It's not miles apart. So when you get, if any of you guys like to feed cucumber and people are going, cucumber's got no nutrition, you should feed courgette. Bugger off, they're not that far apart. And, there's water in the tank, so it doesn't really matter. And to be honest, cucumbers are cheaper than courgettes most of the year round. I know sometimes the year they're not, but they tend to be cute, and we all tend to have one in the salad drawer that we look at and go, we should have used that. Stick on a cucumber and throw it in. If people tell you that nutrition thing, tell them to bugger off, or tell them to give you the numbers. Most people can't be bothered. Yeah, clowns love cucumber. Yeah, it's one of those things. No, it's nothing to do with aloe. It's just, I'm a great believer in variety. So if your fish will eat cucumber, give them cucumber every so often. If they'll eat courgette, give them that. If they'll eat peppers, give them that. Try introducing them to a range of foods. One thing that we have to acknowledge is they wouldn't be getting any of that in the wild. We are trying to mimic stuff that they would get in the wild. So if you have fish that would be eating large amounts of vegetation in the wild, you need to mimic that. And they're not going to do well on just flake food. So one thing we frequently get is things like dollars. In fact, there's probably about 30 fish I can name. I've put plants in and my fish have eaten them all. Yeah, that's because they are desperate for something. Probably fibre. You're just feeding them a very low fibre flake. So start to replicate what you can. So, what do? I grow pondweed in my ponds, and then I throw that in. I throw duckweed in. By the way, if you hate duckweed, I'll acknowledge it does go everywhere. I'm really lucky. Turtles think duckweed is just like manna from heaven. So I grow it in my tropical tanks, lob it down in my turtle tanks, and they just go and slurp it all up, and it's gone. So it's nice and simple for me to get rid of. On that one, snails. There's nothing wrong with having a few snails in your tank. Some fish will eat them. Clown loaches probably shouldn't, because I think there's some diseases that get passed on to clown loaches. But things like this. Blessus is a good one for things like dollars. It's not bad. We are replicating something. And I would rather give them the closest thing I have to hand than not give it them at all. And that's one thing I'm going to be I'm pretty rigid on that one, if you like. Okay, you can sometimes come to me and say, no, that particular thing is bad for fish. And I will 100% agree with that. And I'll listen to anyone say such and such is bad for fish. With the reptiles, we've got really, really strict things we can and can't feed them because of the different calcium phosphorus ratios and things like that. So we have to be quite careful with them. Do I think there's any problems with a bit of fruit in for some fish? No. In fact, for some fish, they need fruit. And it's again, would they get hold of it in the wild? Well, yes, actually. You go in most rivers, you've got trees overhanging and trees drop things in. Leaves would go in, all this sort of thing. Shrimp, get them in, get some leaves in there for them. Mulberry leaves, Indian almond leaves if you want to buy them. Oak's always reasonably popular in my tank with the shrimps. Things like that. Seaweed. So my slight problem with seaweed, and I'm talking about freshwater here, I'm not talking about marine. For marine, yes. For freshwater, again, I'm slightly worried about those mix of oils. It depends again on the fish, though. So research, is there something similar that they'd be eating in the wild? And one simple way to do it, especially if it's human food, really great thing, you can get the nutrient list on there, and it lists everything. So then just compare that to what they'd be eating in the wild and go, oh, it matches, or oh, it's miles off. So it might be that I don't know the salt content of seaweed. I'll be honest, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you the salt content of seaweed. So, oh, there you go. Don't just beat me to it. Seaweed tends to be very high in salt too. So just, it's things like this to be careful of. Alright, so, how much? It's generally based on your tank. So things like tetras, there's nothing wrong with sticking that 3 to 5 minute rule. But just keep an eye on your fish. Slightly underfeed if you have to, but keep an eye on your fish. Things that have got very limited stomachs, so things like goldfish are a good example. Because they've got next to no stomach for digestion, they don't absorb all the nutrients out their food. So they need to be constantly have food going through. But ask yourself what they'd be eating in the wild. Actually, they're not eating a high protein fish food in the wild. They're eating low protein things like they're eating algae, they're eating plants. They will be eating some insects that come off there. So if you're going to feed goldfish and you're worried about them, then put some pondweed in there, put some lettuce in there, put some duckweed in there, things like that for them. But again, it's about, if you do have a fish that needs to be constantly eating, it's probably going to be eating low nutritional stuff. So A, you're going to have to do a lot of water changes to keep up with that because you're going to have a lot of poop coming out the other end. And B, make sure you're feeding it the low nutritional stuff so that you don't overload its system. So, live food. Like I say, I've always got them on. I do like them. I have lots of sort of worm cultures. Most of them are kept on porridge or soil. So we're not talking about, well, we are talking about earthworms. I do keep earthworms as well for a few species. So I've got lots of different tubs with lots of different things in them. I also bring on Dubai roaches. What have I got in right now? I've normally got locusts in, but I haven't got them in right now. I fed the rest of the dragon. Mealworms, Morino worms, often called Mario worms. Those are reasonably easily to do, but you do have to set something up for them. Earthworms, like I say, Walter worms, white worms, micro worms, banana worms, vinegar eels if you've got any fry coming through. You don't have to have all of them, but these are different things you can keep. And for some of them, it's just like an ice cream tub. I've got ice cream tubs all lined up. I am awful for it. If the neighbours, say something, I'm like, oh, can you save the ice cream tubs after the party? Because then I do the live food cultures in them. So a couple of ice cream tubs under your fish tank, and you can then start to add that in to their general diet. And it's something I would recommend. If you've got a reasonable tank, you can have a couple of cultures, nothing wrong with that. You'll often see people go on about brine shrimp. I do raise brine shrimp. I do have a brine shrimp hatchery myself. I do use it for certain things. Problems with brine shrimp. One, they're a marine species, so they will die off in fresh water. So take Diphinia as an alternative. They're a bit harder to keep alive, Diphinia, but I think they're worth it. I threw in the equivalent of about 3 bags of Diphinia into my gourami tank last night. They won't have eaten all that. That's fine. It'll live. It'll wander around. It'll clean the water a bit. Add to my water quality. When they find them, they'll eat them. I find the gouramis I've got are really small, so they can't eat adult Diphinia, so hopefully they'll stay in and breed. So I'll still be adding things, but if they're just trundling around the tank, they can actually catch themselves a bit of live food while they're at it. And that's one thing to think about. So with brine shrimp, I'm always a bit cautious because it will die off in the water and it will foul the water. With some of the worms, if you add too much, again, they'll die off and they'll foul the water. If you're... So, I mean, like I say, I've got the book coming out. There's a big section on live food in there, huge section, with the different ones that you can do and the different things you can add. But it's something that I really think is a positive. If you've got kids that are into gross things, it's brilliant as well. Because as well as the fish, they've got the gross worms or whatever, roaches even if you want to bring them on. Always great. Kids love them. People who like really clean houses, not so much. I mean, for some reason, I'm not allowed to keep my roach colonies in the house. Don't you think that's just totally unfair? Not allowed to keep the fish tanks in the house because I keep flooding the place. Not allowed to keep the roach colonies in the house now. To give you an idea on snails, though, I'm that bad. I have giant African land snails, and when they lay eggs, I use that as fish food. It's really good fish food, really high in calcium. Because I've got very soft water, I struggle to keep pest snails alive. I have to set up a particular tank for them, and I let that tank go a while back, but might start it again. Pest snails are good for some species. So, one thing I keep banging on about is your water quality. And food equals water quality. You feed poor quality food and you're going to have problems with your water. The better quality food, the more nutrition your fish will get out of it, the better your water quality will be. So what do I mean by good quality food? Well, ideally something that mimics their natural diet. So we're talking about insects, we're talking about earthworm-based foods, we are talking about fish-based foods. Now, couple of ones. Another little mini rant, and this goes out for people who read the labels on dog food as well. Fish meal. There seems to be this thing that fish meal is all the bad stuff. Actually, it's not. And do you remember I just said at the start that when you're feeding your fish, you need to be feeding the brains, the bones, the guts, the gut contents and things like that. Well, fish meal isn't even that. Fish meal doesn't contain the guts. That's actually normally pulled out. But it will contain the bits that they couldn't get. So when they cut the fillets off, there's quite a bit left on there. And that goes into forming fish meal. And there's nothing wrong with it. Chicken meal is the one that you see on dog things. So if you are reading for your dog and you see it says 100% chicken, it's probably just like chicken breast and things like that. However, I'm really sorry. I know dogs aren't a wild animal, but even they've not evolved to eat 100% chicken breast. Having said that, my two do, because one of mine's got all sorts wrong with her. She's got the human if she was a human, she'd have irritable bowel syndrome. She's a dog, she has an attitude problem. Anyway, but chicken meal is just, basically once they've taken the cuts off that they want, it's the stuff that's left behind. So yeah, fish meal, nothing wrong with it. It's, to be honest, I think in some ways fish meal is a big part of what fish are missing out their diet, so absolutely no issues. So what are you looking for? You don't want much in the way of carbohydrates. Fish can't really digest carbohydrates, especially not carnivorous fish. Anything that needs a high protein diet can't digest carbohydrates. I'm going to put a little bit of a question mark on other species that are on a very high vegetable diet. They probably can utilize them more depending on what species it is. But don't forget, vegetables have protein. So you will still get some fish that are 100% on a vegetable diet. They eat like one type of leaf in the wild only. And they're actually just surviving off the protein found in that vegetation. So it's not a case of, oh my god, my fish is got to be eating carbs because it's not a carnivore. Actually, some of them still can only absorb the protein. So if it's got lots of carbs, it's not a good food. It needs protein, and they can deal with protein, they can absorb protein, and they can use that as an energy source, and they can use fat as an energy source. So you need to have things looking at that. Ideally in the right mix, but again, different species, different mix, and this is where the problems come in. Where I think I'm back to discus and beef heart and a few other things, and Don's around in the comments and he's been involved in these discussions a lot. One thing that TFK UK brings to the table is that we're not just tropical. We do have a really dedicated marine section. We do have quite a dedicated shrimp section. We do actually have a pond section, just nobody uses it. And you've got me and another guy, Matthew, in the team. And we've also got a separate turtle admin thing. Matt and I are more our turtle specialists, but our turtle group also has is its own admin team. So when the research goes round, often we'll be talking about one thing, thinking about freshwater, and one of the other specialities will crop up and go, no, it's well known in our area, or it's been surmised in our area. And the one we've been looking at lately is omega-3s and omega-6. Oh, we can't find... yeah, Lee, drop us a PM on Facebook, I'll link you through to the group. Unless you've been banned for some reason, then I won't. But I will check for you, mate. And anyway, so omega-3s and omega-6s is ones we've been discussing at a lot. The different fats and the oils that your fish are getting, it's becoming clearer and clearer that on that side of things, it needs to replicate what they'd be getting in the wild. And different fish have evolved to take in different quantities of different fats and oils. And this is, I will hold my hands up here and say straight off, it's getting difficult for this now. So if you can replicate what they would be getting in the wild, and this means a bit of research for you. If you're going to say to me, I've got a community tank, I've not got the time, effort or inclination to do that research, then a good food is one that's based on something your fish should probably get in the wild. It's got a good mix of proteins and fats, and it's got some added vitamins. Because, sadly, if you dry your fish food out and stuff like that, it's going to lose those vitamins. So you need to add them back in. Yeah, as Don's saying, it's mad how much, even sometimes on like the reptile stuff, we'll say something and everyone will go, ooh. And then people go, oh, did you mean this? And they're like, no, I meant reptile. Oh, yes, it does all match up. It's amazing how much research is done in other areas. I mean, one that I'm right now having a little bit of a headache over is lighting in fish. I think there's a lot more, said on the last live stream, I think there's a lot more to lighting in fish than we've even got a clue about right now, and it's a bit scary. So I think that'll be the next thing that we're looking at quite heavily. But, back to diet. So yes, spend a bit more and feed a bit less. If you are buying that kilo stuff off eBay, I strongly suspect you are buying 750 grams of waste and 250 grams of food. You may have just gone out and bought 250 grams of a good quality food and saved yourself a bit of extra hassle on the water changes. And that's the reality. You are not saving money. You are spending extra money on water changes. And that's where I'm coming from on that one. Don't assume that your diet has to mostly be fish food. And that's one thing I'm going to bang on about in the book. There is a lot of things like courgettes, cucumbers, things like that we can use as a crossover. So I mix up... So one thing we do in turtle keeping is we have this thing called turtle pudding. And it's basically fish, shellfish, whatever you can get hold of, broken up calcium, and whatever veg is relevant for your species. You mix it all together and you bind it with gelatin, chop it up, and put that in. Goes down a treat. I mix something very similar, but I mix it up based on each tank. So I'll be including those recipes in the books. Possibly, hopefully, going to do those as a separate little mini one sooner, so that people can start making use of those pretty quickly. So, final main area I wanted to talk about on food tonight, before we start asking for questions from the audience, is diseases. Have any of you heard of Malawi bloat? Is one that we don't know what it's about, we're not sure, nobody knows. Actually, there's quite a lot that we do know about Malawi bloat. There seems to be some evidence it's a particular bacteria in the gut. But it also is very, very possible that it's the absence of bacteria in the gut that cause Malawi bloat. Now, in my other job, in my real life job, I work with, I'm a teacher, lecturer. I started as lecturer, made my way to teacher. I think I should have stayed with the adults. Anyway, I work with kids. And for the last few years, I've been working with children with special needs. And one thing we bang on and on and on about is the links between things like ADHD, ADD, ODD, and good gut bacteria. So children who have, or people who have ADHD, ADD, etc., often have very, very poor gut flora. So of late, a lot of my research on that side of my life has been into the link between diet and behavioural difficulties. Now, when I'm putting my searches in, because you put searches in for stuff and Google tries to guess what you want to do. Because I search for a lot on like good gut bacteria and I search for a lot of fishy stuff, lately it's been giving me the both. And it's a bit scary. It's scary how many diseases seem to be linked to an absence of good gut bacteria. Now, if you feed Malawi, Mbuna, for example, and a few of the other species around there would never see protein in their lives other than little tiny bits they might nibble off the algae. They are predominantly algae and vegetable eaters. So that's what their bulk of their diet would be. Their gut bacteria are fully designed to utilize that. And it seems there is certain enzymes that are provided not by the fish's system, but by gut bacteria to break down certain foods. And I think it's angelfish. Angelfish have got a very specific gut bacteria that provides the enzyme that breaks down proteins in the gut. So without that, angelfish wouldn't be able to digest those proteins. You then start to feed a high protein diet and they can't cope with it, but also it wipes out a huge percentage of their gut bacteria. Now in humans, if you lose a huge percentage of your gut bacteria, you're going to get food poisoning rather quickly because something will come in to fill the vacuum. And next thing you know, you've got really bad stomach upset and things like that. To the point that for some people, they now have to have fecal transplants to actually replace the gut bacteria that they've lost. Our fish suffer similarly, in that if they don't have certain gut bacteria, they get certain diseases. And it's looking very, very much that Malawi bloat is one of them. And it might be that the bloat we see in phytofish and a few other species has a very, very similar root cause. Now, we say, well, we're not giving our fish fecal transplants. Some reptiles, and now it's seeming some fish, actually have to eat the adult's feces for the first few years of their life, or they don't get the right gut flora themselves and then they drop dead later in life from things that are gut flora related. So actually I think our fish do, and I think our fish get it from eating healthy gut flora from other fish. How do you get that? Try and buy from a decent breeder. If they're being mass raised in farms, they're not coming into contact with healthy gut flora from adults. If they are being bred in small tank, or not small tanks, but in small setups in tanks from a dedicated breeder in the UK, then they've got a much higher chance of having had contact with that healthy gut flora. So yes, go to your local auction and buy off your local breeders. You've got a much healthier chance of getting a healthy fish. Also, you might see fish that sometimes are eating feces off other fish. Don't just go, oh, that's gross. Yeah, that's probably the reasons. Tortoises will eat the feces on anything. Cat, dog, anything. If they see it, they're off. I sometimes let the redfoots out into the garden, and if I've missed a dog poo anywhere in the flower beds, the two of them are just like rockets towards it. I can tell where it is. The way the two tortoises just go whoop and off. And it's vile. And I don't let them eat it, no, because it's vile. But I think that's to a certain extent getting that gut flora. And I think fish are looking for the same. So don't feed them something they're not evolved to take. Don't feed your Malawi a high protein diet. The Malawi may be fine with it, but their gut bacteria aren't. And without their gut bacteria, the Malawi aren't fine. The Malawi are dead. Also, think of all those parameters things I'm constantly banging on about. It's probable that that's going to impact on the gut flora as well. Can we maybe start to link hole in the head? I think we can definitely link hole in the head to poor diet. And often that poor diet may not be deliberate. You might be providing the fish with the right diet, but the bugger's just not eating it. Yeah, Don just said he thinks elephants do that too. Yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of species that do need this for a decent gut bacteria. Bronwyn saying she's the only way. Yeah, I'm on quite a restricted diet as well because otherwise I get stupider than I already am. Put it this way: you let me have certain things, and you think I'm bad about getting electrocuted now. Safety just isn't an issue, so I have to watch my diet. I'm allowed alcohol, just not allowed anything with sweeteners in, because then I get a bit daft. Yeah, if pufferfish aren't healthy, they lose their ability to digest shells and can die from that. Yeah, it sounds like it probably is gut bacteria related. It's one of these things that you've got to be constantly aware of. Micronutrients are really important for them and their gut bacteria. So what do I feed my fish? Variety. And that's the only thing I can bang on about. So each of my tanks has do's and don'ts. So there are some tanks that I can't put a lot of protein in. There are some tanks that I wouldn't say put anything very rich in fat in. But I don't... generally, I don't have very specialist feeders. I haven't got anything from the Rift Lakes in right now. If I had like Rift Lake cichlids, then I'd be very careful from that point of view. And I'd deliberately pick the fish in there so they could all have the same diet. But then take a tank that can take pretty much anything. They will get everything I can possibly give them in variety. So a lot of live foods, a lot of different types of fish foods. If I can add a bit of different things in, they'll get various fish, actual from the butchers that goes in there. My turtles get a lot of fish. I buy whole fish wherever I can. My mum walked into Morrison's, saw they had sprats and bought the lot. And the guy went, "You're not with that turtle lady, are you?" She was like, No, I don't know her at all. When are you next getting sprats in, by the way? So yes, we clear our local Morrison's out of sprats every time they bring them in. So a little bit of that will go in with my fish. So I'm a great believer in that huge variety. I'm a great believer in not letting them eat anything they shouldn't have. But I'm also a great believer in research, and if there's something that's vital for their diet, add it in. If it's something that they're known, and you might not know it's vital, but find out what they eat in the wild. And if they have a very small diet in the wild, try and see what you can replicate. And drop me a message or post up on the group somewhere or on the forums. Forum will be easier because we'll tend to spot it and be able to comment on it. But if you know you've got a fish that eats a large amount of fungi, there's certain fish that eat underwater-based fungi, then, well, what can we replicate that with? Try them with mushrooms. It might be that you're getting something from there. What I don't think works is when we have fish on single source diets, and for some people that's just really bad quality flake. For some people it's just beef heart. For some people, and this is one I'm going to just point out very, very briefly that I'm seeing a lot of people do. So just a heads up, don't feed your fish solely on prawns. Prawns and goldfish, I'm just going to hit the live feeding debate again in a second. Prawns and goldfish both contain a toxin that inhibits the absorption of a B vitamin. And I'm seeing fish on the group die from that poisoning. And I've only ever seen it in reptiles until recently. For some reason, we've gone really, really mad on feeding prawns to our fish. Cooked prawns, it's actually been destroyed, but you're still not giving them that micronutrient. And I'm starting to see fish die of the equivalent of scurvy. Guppies used to get it quite a lot. We used to see guppies drop dead of the fishy equivalent of scurvy. And vitamin C deficiency is another one guppies suffer from a lot. So we need to start to think about adding in that variety. You can give them a little bit of what's bad, but make sure you're giving them a lot of what's good. So, pea puffers shouldn't just eat bloodworm. No, bloodworm can be... I mean, some people say bloodworm's bad. Don't feed bloodworm, it's evil. It's alright, in moderation. They'd only probably see it for one portion of the year, when mosquitoes and stuff like that are actually actively laying. They wouldn't be seeing it every day. That's another thing I'm a great believer in. So my fish have had a glut of cucumber. They're not going to see cucumber for the rest of the year now. They're going to now start to see courgette. And then once that's at the allotment, they won't see that for a while. I also grow a lot of plants hydroponically that they can eat if they want to. So they'll dip in. Sue, I don't know if Sue's around, and I can't remember what she told me it was. She told me about a herb that she grew, and she had some fish in an outdoor, a mini pond outside for the summer, and they were actively jumping to get at this herb. So I'm going to start growing herbs so they can go over the edge of my tanks and they can nibble on them. Zebra danios and neon tetras. So again, think they're small. They'd probably be eating a lot of insects, a lot of detritus out the water. So start to replicate that. King British. See, I've got a problem with King British because their turtle food is linked to a number of turtle deaths, and I don't just mean 2 or 3. I mean 200 or 300. Because people fed only that and they got a nutritional deficiency because of that. And I don't even King British say they should be the only thing you feed them. Don't know what quality their flake is. I've just got this thing against them for that. NT Labs food is good. I really like the NT Labs food. It's best to feed raw or cooked prawn on the odd occasion. I feed both. I feed it to my turtles on occasion. Whichever's cheapest. And yeah, so with the prawns, whichever's cheapest, I tend towards cooked because it destroys that particular I can't remember what it is. I'll have to look it up. I'll post it on the group when I remember what it is. But it destroys that particular anti-nutrients, if you like. So I tend to lean towards cooked. But if you're feeding occasionally, it's not going to hurt. But I mean occasionally. Don saying Vitalis. Yeah, Vitalis is good food. It's really good food. I mean, the ones I tend to feed are NT Labs, Vitalis, Fish Science, Repashy. Love Repashy. I think that's great stuff. Great for like hiding other things in as well. It's like, you know, as parents will know what I talk about when you chop up certain things really small and hide them in your kids' food. Some fish like that. Some fish need that. What else have I got in there? I've got some Tetra stuff. I think at some point I'll have to take the camera down and show you my... I've literally got one of those, like an under-counter fridge, but with a glass front, and it's just full of different fish foods in there. And why? Partly because some have been sent to me to try, but mostly because I go to a lot of auctions, and when you walk in and pay your fee, you normally pay like a $5 on the door or something, and they give you a bag, and there's fish food in there. It's great. Oh, thiamine C. Now, thank you, Rotten Sod. So, thiaminase. There you go. That's the closest you're getting. And are you going to Aqua, Don? Because if he's going to Aqua, he's going to pay. Don't think he is, though, Rotten Sod. Yeah. Any shops and stuff, our traders who are at Aqua, we will be there. We will be roaming around causing trouble. We won't be causing trouble. And Tori's not with us. For people who know Tori, you understand why I've just said Tori's not with us. Tori's not with us anymore. But she is with them. Yeah. Anyway. No, Don's not going to Accra. It's fine. For those of you who don't know Tori, she was one of the mods, but she works in a fish shop as well, and she just got too much. She had too much things like real life, so she isn't on. But, yeah. She goes around and beats her boss up a little bit. Just a bit mean to him. It's fine. Dan likes it, really, I think. I think he does. So, anyway. Live food. What's this rant for? Right. Live food in the way of non-vertebrates is fine. I have no problems with that. Morally, I have no problems with it because they don't have the same pain receptors as vertebrates. And how can you prove that? Because they don't have a spine for the nerve cords to go down. But plenty of studies have shown that they don't have the same pain response. Even things like snails don't have the same pain response. So, you know, if you feel really guilty for standing on a snail, actually science shows you shouldn't. They don't have the same, but they will avoid painful stimuli. So snails, yeah. Anyway, we do know that octopi and lobsters will, to a certain extent, have pain stimuli. And octopus are definitely smart enough to know when something bad's happening. So there's a little bit of a question mark in there. And I don't think you should be feeding something that big live anyway. But we are talking about here, when I say live feeding, I am talking about dropping in goldfish. That's a frequent one. Guppies, platies, mollies, they frequently get used. Some people like to drop in live mice for certain things to feed on. Frogs are frequently dropped in. all this sort of thing are fed to fish as live feeding. Right. So there are two sides to this argument. Side one. My fish is wild, and my fish has never understood... Well, I can't get my fish onto dead food. That's mostly complete rubbish. There is going to be the odd case, and if you are one of the odd cases, I do apologise. But the bulk of that is complete and utter rubbish. And please feel free to mentally insert the word I actually meant there. Why? I've had plenty of wild fish, and I've got them all onto dead. No problems at all. A good quality diet. Sometimes you have to leave them a couple of days to get hungry. Drop something in. Drop it in near where the filter is, the filter output is. It moves, they're hungry, they dive on it, they realise it's food. Jobs are good. 9 times out of 10 that works. Occasionally it doesn't. Occasionally you have to persevere. Do you remember I said it's very difficult to underfeed your fish? It's very easy to get them hungry and refuse to feed them. So yeah, sometimes I've had a holdout of a week or two. Yeah, I've had up to 2 weeks where the fish just went, no, I'm not eating it. Not going to happen. Other side of the spectrum, there are certain turtle species that only feed on movement. So when they see the movement and they see a particular movement of a swimming style of particular fish, they'll strike. That's a different ballgame. Now, let's say, for example, I get a turtle that won't feed, or I get a fish and I can't get it onto normal foods. What do? I have a choice here. Choice one is I can refuse to have that to take in. So I've always wanted a Matamata turtle, and maybe I'll have one in the future, but they are notoriously difficult to get onto anything but live tetras and guppies. Notorious for it. Some have, most haven't. Now, I also think they're another species that they drop dead at they die at the drop of a hat. And I think it's partly diet. I think it's dietary because people are just feeding them rubbish, like really sick guppies and goldfish and stuff like that, and they're dropping dead off that. Yeah, you love Matamata as well. Now, here's where the argument comes in, and I can see both sides of the argument on that. If I put a guppy in a Matamata tank, the guppy is going to be swimming round over this oddly shaped leaf. The oddly shaped leaf is going to move, and the guppy is going to be gone. That's that side of the round. But let's look at it with fish. It's very, there's only certain species of fish that are ambush predators like that. And the bulk of the time we are talking about Oscars, we are talking about arowana, we're talking about some of the things that Don keeps, so he can put some comments in the thing about the different species that people regularly go, I can only feed live. Should you be doing that? No. Sorry. In the case of if it's a rare species and it's notorious for only feeding live and you need that one to stay alive for the good of that species, consult your vet. And if your vet says you can only get it feeding live, your vet will come up with a plan with you. And that plan may include dropping guppies or mollies or whatever in the tank for it to feed on for a certain length of time. In which case, you need to start saying, right, so I'm consulting with my vet, we're working on a plan, and we're going to get somewhere eventually with a view of getting this onto something better for it. Because the second you stop feeding live is the way you start to have much more control of its diet, where you can start to feed it the right stuff, where you can change the diet, you can condition it, you can do all these things. It's better for the animal you're feeding. Let's ignore the whole debate about feeding the actual terror and pain caused to the live food. Let's just look at the animal you're feeding. You have more control over its diet if you are feeding dead, if you are feeding something that you can put together. Do I think that you should kill the fish rather than feed it live? No. Actually, I do think there are times that with vets, that where you're talking to a vet and you're discussing it with them, then maybe you should, as an interim, start to look at this. And that seems really, really heartless. However, I know how many thousands of fish are culled every day just because they didn't look right for the tropical fish market. So, I've bred fish before. I've had fish that I've looked at and thought, I'm never going to sell those. I'm never going to be able to. Anything that's deformed and looks like it's in pain, I cull immediately. I'm not letting a fish live at the risk of it being in pain. And people say, well, that's cruel. That's my version of not cruel. Let's say you're breeding a particular colour morph or a particular shape for things like parrots or koi or something like that. But say you're breeding for a particular colour morph. Goldfish are a great example. Until recently, all my goldfish swimming around in the pond were horrible brown grossy ones. They were fine for me, I just wanted in there to eat like a bit to keep the mosquito levels down. No problems with that. But in a bunch of eggs from 2 standard goldfish, I got 1 that was gold. I got about 400 that were grossy and brown. Nobody wants grossy brown goldfish. I did offer them for free. Said they weren't suitable for live feeding because I know what the goldfish contain. What do you think I had to do with them? Sadly, I had to cull most of them because nobody wants 400 odd brown goldfish. And that's what happens with breeding. To breed fish, you are killing a certain amount. It's why now I only breed things that tend to breed true. So things like cichlids are a lot better, and I'm not talking about hybrid cichlids, I'm just talking about like rams and apistogramma. They tend to breed true in all the fry. Other than the odd occasional one that's disabled, and to be honest, the parents tend to eat that. They tend to be fine. So that's my choice. I tend to now breed things that don't need large amounts of culling. But most breeders do it. So I'm not going to go down this route that we're killing a poor innocent little fishy. We'd have been killing them anyway. I do think anything that is killed for food should be killed humanely. And I absolutely hate fishing boats for that. I don't think fish that we get for food are killed humanely. But that's a different one to argue about. So if you are able to... If that fish dies without pain or suffering, I have no problems with it. And that's why I think some ambush predators kill without pain or suffering. As far as we're aware. What I hate to see is the whole, let's tip 20 goldfish in a tank and let's let our gulper catfish chase them around and eat them. That's not without pain and suffering. That's with stress and terror. And that is wrong. And anybody who likes to see that really needs to have their head examined. So yeah, that's one thing I'm really passionate about. If you're going to kill something, do it humanely. And I really don't care, as long as it's healthy for both sides, I don't care what you're feeding to what, if you're doing it humanely. So I know quite a few people who've had bigger cichlids that for one reason or another they've had to get rid of. They've had too many, they've been breeding them on. So people who've been breeding some of the bigger cichlids, at some point they have to only choose the best. And what they've culled, they've fed to something else. But they've culled them humanely first, and then they've fed them to something else. I've got no problems with that, to be honest, guys. I'm not sitting here getting all squeamish about that. That's a part of life. But like I say, the second you tip it into a tank and let it run round and slam off the sides just for some stupid video with some stupid likes, no. And I'll chuck you off my group if you put that on. Right now there's a picture of a turtle hanging onto the back of a plec. It's got about 80 members, it feels like. Must be at least 20 people have been banned from the group for sharing that. If you think of sharing it, stop it. It's just cruelty. Stop giving Unilad and Viral What's-His-Name all the money from showing what is abject animal cruelty. Yeah, you have to do it with some fry. You just get too many. And that's the reality of breeding. And it's sad. To look at it on the other side, you think how many thousands and thousands of fish are culled from fish farms. Every time you think about it, I mean, it's 3,000 to 1 for koi is the number. It's the main number that comes out and about. Parrots, seemingly it's more. To get one decent parrot, you're culling more than 3,000 of the healthy offspring. Angelfish, especially on the colours. Some of that's alright, actually. We're starting to see... so, for example, rams are... With the... black rams. Black rams are really popular right now. They look gorgeous. But notice that your normal rams coming into the shop don't look as good. That's because they're actually the rejects from the black rams. So whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is another debate. But, yeah, that's one of the things. Okay, guys. Sorry it's not a super long one tonight. I haven't been too well today, so I'm sort of... I just want to go home and go to sleep now, I'm afraid. Big baby that I am. But first of all, I'm going to go down and feed all my fish. Drop me a message if you want any more information on anything, or like I say, post on the forum so that then lots of other people, because there will be other people thinking the same thing. If you want to support us, some of you already are, thank you very much, but if you want to support us, Patreon's in there. If you know you can't afford to, and that's fine, that is 100% fine, I've put a link in for the shop, and I should have put in a link for the Amazon Influencers shop, so if you're going to buy anything off Amazon, just buy it via there, and hopefully they'll give us a bit of a kickback. And if you're not in the group, join the group. We do like people over there, even though Facebook is messing us around a little bit. And you can interact with Fuzzy Duckling 94. He keeps big fish. You wouldn't believe someone with the username of Fuzzy Duckling. He's one of our big fish people. Anyway, guys, so yes, head over there. Join in another conversation. If you like everything else, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And I will see you, definitely see you on Wednesday. Someone says, I like ducks. Jeez, that's almost as bad as that kid that goes, I like turtles. Which, by the way, that shows on every turtle group ever. Anyway, guys, join in over there. I'll be back on Wednesday, where hopefully I will feel slightly less like I just want to go to bed and sleep. And keep your eyes open for the book, because that will be published sooner rather than later. Anyway, guys, night all.